Right, so today I want to talk about something that I think is a really important issue in society today that, for some very unfortunate reasons, is not allowed to be talked about openly. And I would add both by men and especially women. And that's the male female suicide rate difference. His men are 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than women. The vast majority of them are white men. The suicide rate is highest in middle-aged white men in particular, and I don't want to single out other races of men, but I think it's particularly high in white men, and I think this is very obvious for anyone paying attention, which isn't a lot of people, but whites are the only race of people, at least in North America and more or less the Western world, that aren't allowed to um, organize and organize so that they can benefit their own group. If you're black and you want to talk about the black community and what can help develop the black community, that's encouraged. That's a great thing. If you're Hispanic, same thing. Even Asian, to not quite as much of an extent as other races, but if you're white and you want to organize and try and figure out how we can improve things for whites, it's because you're a racist, it's because you're a Nazi, all these kind of things. So no one ever does it, and the only people that do it risk and usually end up being called these kind of things, and they're completely ostracized from society. So, like I said, that's one of the main reasons why it's so high in white men and whites in general. I think a young white men is arguably just as much, and obviously men as a whole too. But why it's particularly high in men is because men are grossly underappreciated in society. They're blamed for things that aren't their fault. In the idea that we have this idea as a society that women were always oppressed and they still are, when in reality neither of those are true. Um, and like I said, whites are the only race that aren't allowed to organize, so that they can improve things for their race, and which is why you see the fact that being a white man now is pretty much a detriment in almost every way. It does help, obviously, in some ways. I mean, everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, but um, like I said, this is something that needs to be talked about so much more. And when you read, I know I first came across these studies from reading The Boy Crisis, and it's just such an eye-opening experience. Like, even to someone like me who's fairly aware of all these kind of things, that it's so eye-opening that it's almost it's insane that we were lied to as a society. We think that men, the only reason that even men want to get together and discuss issues that just affect men, and how can we help men's issues. That must mean that's because you're a sexist, that you don't care about women. It's not because your suicide rate is 3.5 times higher. It's not because male depression is rampant and all these kind of things. It's because you're a sexist. And those people just want to shut down the argument too. And the other big reason that contributes to a lot of this stuff is that women have natural in-group preferences, which means even when women hear these kind of stats, number one, the overwhelming majority of them are completely ignorant, or when they do hear it, they'll lash out and they'll call you a sexist, all that kind of stuff. And the other reason is that women have a natural in-group preference, which means women naturally are going to support women pretty much no matter what. And obviously there's lots of exceptions, but on average. Men don't have that. Men actually have, on average, the opposite, which means even if you're suffering, you still want to please the women, and that comes from the disposable male having to go off and die and fight wars in the past, not anymore. But that's an evolutionarily trait that's been developed in men and it's took thousands of years, and for that evolution to happen, and men are no longer appreciated. The other thing too is that this stuff costs the economy a lot of money. It destroys families, all these kind of things, and it's a very, very disappointing thing, and it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more. But like I said, that would require women to basically go against their biology and men to go against their biology. Like I said, you talk to a lot of men about this kind of stuff, and it's even in one ear, out the other ear with them. They've been generally so heavily brainwashed, and their evolutionary biology has determined them to be disposable. I read an interesting statistic the other day that in history, women were 17 times more likely to reproduce than men, which basically means that that's just how important it was for a society. I mean, back in the day, not as much anymore, for men to for men to basically, at the drop of a hat, go fight in a war and more than likely die so that their tribe, their country, their village, whatever, could survive. And that's something that whenever they make the argument of the woman oppression argument, they never say that, oh, well, it was still worse than that. They never do a direct comparison, because if they did a direct comparison, people would realize that you'd probably rather have been a woman. Given the fact that you're 17 times more likely to reproduce, I don't think that there's any argument you could make against that. But that's about all as far as this video goes. Like I said, this stuff needs to be talked about a lot more if we want to continue to improve as a society. It's not going to happen until we can start discussing the actual issues, the underlying issues behind these problems. And that's one of the big reasons why things are so stagnant now, is that we can't talk about the actual problems. We have these fake pseudo problems that people think are the problems. Like, for example, this kind of stuff. Oh, it's just male sexism. That's all it is. It's toxic masculinity, or any BS reason that they come up with. When in reality, it's not. It's that men they're afterthoughts in society, that they're not allowed to organize to help improve their own well-being, all that kind of stuff. And it really bothers me when I see on all these social media campaigns and all this stuff to end the mental illness stigma, all these kind of things that we have. We have the Let's Talk Day in Canada, and I laugh, and I think that like 95% of you don't, when someone actually brings up actual uncomfortable things like this, they run. The posting on the social media is, it's easy. It takes 30 seconds to do, and you get to make yourself feel good. But someone comes with you of one of these, of something like this, and it's all of a sudden things actually get uncomfortable, and it'll take some actual work to get it done, and then they run. And that's something that really, really bothers me, as people, I mean, it makes sense. It's a lot easier to post the stuff on social media and, get the approval of your friends than to actually go out there and do something and risk disapproval. And that's, to me, that's a mark of true character, but most people don't have that nowadays. So that's about it as far as this video goes. If you like it, make sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.